Few things in the diesel world stir up more emotion than a great engine that got pulled before its time. These engines didn't break down. They didn't wear out. The rules simply changed. The regulators moved in, and the bean counters decided it was cheaper to start over than to fight. Over the past 50 years, the American trucking industry lost some of the finest diesel engines ever designed, engines that could run 1,000,000 miles without breaking a sweat. The mechanics understood them down to the last bolt, and the drivers trusted them with their livelihoods and their lives. Every single one of them was killed by the same force, the same quiet, slow-moving pressure that had nothing to do with competition or obsolescence. Emissions regulations. Now, nobody is saying clean air doesn't matter. It does. But what happened to these 5 engines wasn't a graceful retirement. It was an execution. And if you ever turned a wrench on any of them, you already know which ones belong on this list. So which 5 diesel engines should have never been killed? And what exactly did the industry lose when they disappeared? To answer that, we need to go back to when American trucking still ran on iron, oil, and mechanical simplicity. Before the acronyms took over. Let's start with number 5. What do you get when you build a diesel engine that doesn't care about horsepower races, doesn't chase flashy numbers, and instead focuses on one thing: putting every ounce of power to the ground? You get the Mack E7, and if you ever drove one, you already know why it belongs on this list. Mack engineers conceived the E7 in 1988 and put it into production the following year. It replaced the older E6 platform, and from day one, it was clear it wasn't trying to be the most powerful engine on the road. It was trying to be the most useful one. The E7 displaced just under 12 liters across 6 cylinders. In its baseline configuration, it made 250 horsepower and 975 foot-pounds of torque. At the top end, in its 454 horsepower spec, it twisted out 1,660 foot-pounds at just 1,200 RPM. Those aren't numbers that win magazine covers, but they're numbers that move loaded dump trucks up steep grades all day long without complaint. Mack's philosophy was different from everyone else. While Cummins and Caterpillar chased the long-haul market with bigger displacement and higher horsepower, Mack focused on what happened between the wheels and the pavement. Their transmissions and differentials multiplied the engine's output in ways competitors couldn't match. A 400 horsepower Mack didn't feel like a 400 horsepower anything else. It felt heavier, more planted, like it understood the difference between moving fast and working hard. The E7 found its home in the dirtiest, most punishing jobs in America: refuse trucks, concrete mixers, dump trucks hauling gravel out of quarries, fire engines that needed to start instantly and run flat out for hours, city bus fleets that demanded absolute reliability on tight maintenance budgets. These weren't glamorous applications, but they were the backbone of the working economy, and the E7 handled every one of them without drama. Over its production life, Mack produced 16 different versions of the E7, refining the platform without ever abandoning its core identity. In 1990, they introduced the Econovance Variable Injection Timing System, which improved fuel efficiency and reduced emissions without adding electronic complexity. The system was exclusive to the E7 and became one of the engine's defining technical achievements. It was a smart, elegant solution. Classic Mack thinking. Solve the problem mechanically, keep it simple, and move on. The real magic was its simplicity. The mechanical versions could be diagnosed and repaired with basic tools. In the field, by mechanics who didn't need a laptop. Injector failure was rare. The bottom end was virtually indestructible. Operators reported running well past 1,000,000 miles on original internals, with nothing more than routine maintenance. Then the emissions regulations started tightening. Mack responded with the E-Tech version, adding electronic controls. It was still a good engine. But when the 2004 EPA standards hit, Mack bolted on exhaust gas recirculation with the ASET variant. And that's where the trouble started. The EGR system brought turbo problems, increased soot buildup, and complexity. The E7 was never designed to carry. The engine that had been bulletproof for 15 years suddenly needed constant attention. By 2007, the original E7 was gone. Mack moved to the Volvo-derived MP series, and the Bulldog lost its own heart. Operators who ran mechanical E7s still talk about them the way old soldiers talk about a weapon they trusted in combat. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fast, but it never let you down. If you're the kind of person who appreciates real engines and real history, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We're putting out new videos every week covering the machines that built this country, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. If the Mack E7 was the blue-collar workhorse, then the Caterpillar 3406 was the engine that owned the open road. And the E model might be the most beloved truck engine of the last 30 years. So how did the company that built it walk away from the highway entirely? The 3406 series started in 1973 with the A model. Over 2 decades, Caterpillar refined it through the B and C models. But it was the E model, introduced in 1993, that changed everything. The 3406E was Caterpillar's first fully electronic heavy-duty diesel. It displaced 14.6 liters across 6 cylinders, with horsepower ratings from 375 up to 550. It combined electronic precision with mechanical toughness. A massively overbuilt cast iron block, a forged steel crankshaft, and cylinder heads designed for easy service. Everything about it said, built to run forever. And when something wears out, you can fix it without an engineering degree. Owner-operators fell in love with it. By the mid-90s, the vast majority of Peterbilts rolling off the line carried a 3406E under the hood. An entire aftermarket culture grew around it. Programmers wrote custom software for the electronic control module, unlocking horsepower that Cat had left on the table. It became the hot rod engine of the trucking world. Across all versions, Caterpillar produced nearly 575,000 3406 engines. Many are still running today, decades after rolling off the assembly line. The engine earned its place alongside the Cummins Big Cam as one of the defining power plants of American trucking. In 1999, Cat replaced the E with the C15. Essentially the same architecture refined for tighter emissions. The C15 carried the torch respectably through the early 2000s. But then came ACERT technology, and things got complicated. The C15 ACERT divided opinion sharply. Some operators loved it. Others found the emissions hardware unreliable and expensive to maintain. Caterpillar was spending enormous resources making truck engines comply with regulations that kept getting stricter, and the return was shrinking. Then in 2008, Caterpillar stunned the trucking world. They were leaving the on-highway market entirely. After nearly 50 years, the company that built the 3406E simply walked away. On-highway engines were a small portion of their business, and the cost of future compliance wasn't justified by the revenue. For thousands of owner-operators who built their businesses around Cat power, it felt like a betrayal. The 3406E didn't die because it was obsolete. It died because the company that built it decided the fight wasn't worth it. And that might be the most frustrating kind of death an engine can have. Ask any veteran long-haul driver to name the best diesel engine ever put in a truck, and you'll hear 2 words more often than any others: Red Top. The Cummins N14 Select Plus, with its distinctive red valve covers, might be the most mourned engine in American trucking history. The N14 arrived in 1987 as the natural successor to the 855 Big Cam. Cummins didn't reinvent the wheel, they refined it. The N14 shared the same bore and stroke, 5.5 by 6 inches, The same 855 cubic inch displacement, the same wet sleeves, and the same modular 4-valve heads. If the big cam was the foundation, the N14 was the finished house. But Cummins made improvements where they mattered. Enlarged crankshaft rod journals, independent rocker shafts for each cylinder, and the addition of an air-to-air intercooler that let the engine breathe more efficiently under load. In 1990, Cummins introduced the Select electronic fuel system, electronically controlled unit injectors still mechanically actuated by the camshaft. Best of both worlds. Then in 1997 came the Select Plus. This was the Red Top. Power ratings climbed to 525 horsepower, with torque reaching 1,850 foot-pounds at 1,200 RPM. The Red Top became the engine serious owner-operators demanded. The hard parts were virtually indestructible. Fuel economy was competitive. Operators regularly reported 7 miles per gallon, pulling reefer trailers. Numbers that held their own against the Detroit Series 60 and the Cat 3406E. The N14 proved you didn't have to sacrifice reliability for efficiency. And when something needed attention, the repairs were straightforward and affordable. Compared to what was coming next. The engine's only consistent weakness was its injectors. The Select system was sensitive to fuel quality, and contaminated fuel could lead to expensive problems. But operators who maintained their fuel systems properly found the N14 to be virtually maintenance-free between major overhauls. By the late 90s, the N14 was competing head-to-head with the Cat 3406E and the Detroit Series 60. 3 genuinely excellent choices. You couldn't go wrong with any of them. That era, the mid-90s to early 2000s, might have been the golden age of American truck engines, and the Red Top was right in the middle of it. Then Cummins killed it. In 2000, the N14 was discontinued and replaced by the ISX. The EPA's tightening standards made the architecture too expensive to certify. The ISX was a clean sheet design built to accommodate exhaust gas recirculation, particulate filters, and the wave of emissions hardware that was coming. It was capable, but it was never the N14. The early ISX models had teething problems the Red Top never would have tolerated, and the complexity meant higher costs and more downtime. Truckers didn't just lose an engine. They lost a philosophy. The idea that a diesel should be tough enough for 1,000,000 miles. If you were a fleet manager in the 90s, one engine dominated your purchasing decisions. The Detroit Diesel Series 6012.7 wasn't just successful. It was the engine that proved electronic diesel technology actually worked. The Series 60 launched in 1987 as the first heavy-duty diesel with full electronic controls. The DDEC system managed fuel injection, timing, and engine protection. While competitors debated whether electronics belonged in a truck, Detroit put them in production and dared the market to say no. The market said yes, loudly. The 12.7 displaced 778 cubic inches across 6 cylinders. By the DDEC4 generation, it was putting out up to 515 horsepower with fuel economy that embarrassed larger displacement competitors. Freightliner made it their primary offering. Penske standardized their fleet around it. For 20 years, the Series 60 and the Freightliner Century class were practically inseparable. The default combination for any fleet that needed trucks to run hard, burn less fuel, and stay out of the shop. The engine's success was built on a simple formula. Electronic controls allowed precise fuel management that mechanical systems couldn't match. The displacement was optimized for the American market, big enough to handle heavy loads, small enough for competitive fuel economy on long interstate runs. And Detroit had learned from decades of building two-stroke engines that durability meant engineering margins into every critical component. Mechanics appreciated the logical design and electronic diagnostics that made troubleshooting faster than the guesswork of purely mechanical engines. By 1993, Detroit had captured roughly 33% of the heavy-duty market, and the Series 60 was the reason. Then came the transition. In 2001, Detroit introduced the 14-liter version to compensate for power losses from emissions equipment. It was capable, but never matched the elegant balance of the 12.7. When Daimler phased out the Series 60 entirely for the DD13 and DD15, the story was over. Ask a fleet mechanic who worked on both, and they'll tell you the 12.7 was the sweet spot. Not too big, not too small. Advanced enough for real efficiency gains, but not so complex that every sensor failure triggered a cascade of fault codes and derates. It was the Goldilocks engine of American trucking, and nothing Detroit has built since has quite captured that balance. We've saved the most personal one for last, because this engine didn't just build a reputation, it built a culture. The Cummins 5.9-liter 12-valve is the diesel that turned Dodge pickups into legends. And when Cummins replaced it, something irreplaceable was lost. The partnership began in 1989, when Chrysler needed a diesel for the Ram to compete with Ford, and GM Cummins offered the 6BT, a turbocharged inline-six displacing 359 cubic inches, originally designed for commercial applications. Putting a commercial-grade diesel in a consumer pickup was radical. The 12-valve earned its nickname from its cylinder head. 2 valves per cylinder, 12 total. The injection system was purely mechanical, a Bosch VE rotary pump with no electronic intervention. No engine control module, no sensors, no software. You turned the key, the pump did its job, and the engine ran. It made between 160 and 215 horsepower with 400 to 440 foot-pounds of torque. Modest numbers, but delivered with a mechanical directness that modern turbo diesels can't replicate. You felt every combustion event. You heard the turbo spool. Nothing stood between you and the machinery but physics. The durability became legend. The cast iron block was massively overbuilt for pickup truck duty. The forged crankshaft and rods were industrial grade. The Bosch pump could run hundreds of thousands of miles without rebuilding. Million-mile 12-valve trucks became common enough that people stopped being surprised. The aftermarket discovered that because the fuel system was entirely mechanical, adding power was as simple as turning up the injection pump and bolting on a bigger turbo. No tuning software, no electronic limiters. Just hand tools and mechanical knowledge. Guys were pulling 400, 500 horsepower out of an engine that left the factory making 215, and the bottom end held together because Cummins had built it to industrial standards. The 12-valve became the foundation of an entire performance diesel culture that's still thriving today. In 1998, Cummins replaced it with a 24-valve using the Bosch VP44 electronic pump. More powerful, smoother, better for emissions. A better engine by most measures, but not the 12-valve. The VP44 introduced electronic complexity and eventually reliability concerns that the mechanical VE pump never had. The 24-valve was still a Cummins, but the visceral connection between driver and engine had been filtered through a layer of electronics that changed the character of the experience. Today, clean 12-valve Dodge Rams sell for more than they cost new. Rusty, high mileage, 30 years old, and people pay premium prices because nothing since offers the same mechanical purity, modification potential, and indestructible durability. The 12-valve was the last truly mechanical diesel in a mass-market American vehicle, and every diesel pickup built since has relied on electronics that deliver better numbers but can't deliver that same connection between driver and machine. So there they are, 5 engines the industry didn't want to lose but lost anyway. The Mack E7, the workhorse that never cared about glory. The Caterpillar 3406E, so good its own maker walked away rather than watch it die slowly. The Cummins N14 Red Top, the last great hybrid the truckers still chase. The Detroit Series 6012.7, the Goldilocks engine that got pushed aside for something bigger. And the Cummins 12-valve, the mechanical heart that became more valuable with every passing year. What ties them together is that each one hit the balance between performance and simplicity exactly right. Before the particulate filters, the SCR systems, the DEF tanks, and the regen cycles that pull trucks off the road when they should be making money. The replacements are cleaner, that's a fact. But something was traded, and the people who depend on diesel power feel it every day. In repair bills, in downtime, in the shift from understanding your engine to trusting a computer to manage it. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these 5 engines do you miss the most? Did you drive one, wrench on one, or build your career around one? And is there an engine I missed that deserved a spot on this list? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know which engine earned your loyalty and whether the replacements ever measured up. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to learn more about the history of the engines that shaped the world we live in.